Anyways, on to the main thing I'm talking about this episode. Scott Morrison's final showdown with Leigh Sales on the ABC 7:30 on Monday night. And well, I couldn't really call it an interview because Scott Morrison would not agree with any of Leigh's questions.
Well, I have to disagree on a couple of points there, Leigh. Well, I completely reject that, Leigh. That is not what the Royal Commission found, Leigh. Well, they're Labor's criticisms, and that's not what I get. So I just don't buy into this narrative. I'm not getting into the scenario games, Leigh. No. Well, you said we'd been blindsided, Leigh, and I'm just saying that actually wasn't the case. And one of the things we've had to change with, Leigh, I'm trying to answer the question.
No, you're not. Just like the last 3 years, you're trying to spin, dodge, and weave your way out of anything and make it sound like you have a plan by just constantly saying the word plan.
Because we got the economic plan. I know our economic plan is working, and our economic plan, so our emissions plan with a clear plan, we have a plan where it isn't going to plan, you change the plan, and so our plan does that. Our plan is a long-term technology plan. Because we have the economic plan, we've got the opportunity to bring people forward on that plan, and it's a plan that I know is working, and that's the key, because the plan depends on knowing what you're talking about on the economy.
Yes, you know you can definitely trust Scott Morrison's economic plan. Like, remember when he sent us into a per capita recession in early 2019 before the pandemic even happened?
A report released today has revealed without population growth, Australia would right now be in recession.
The national accounts showed Australia is in a recession on a per capita basis.
But Australia has now fallen into a per capita recession after a year of sluggish economic growth.
This is not an economic term that any economist has any recognition of. So I'm not going to engage in the made-up statistics that the Labor Party are talking about.
Geez, Scott Morrison will just deny anything if he doesn't want to answer a question. I'm amazed he doesn't deny the existence of money when he's asked about the debt and deficit. And speaking of which, it's no surprise that with debt having doubled before the pandemic and is about to approach $1 trillion, Leigh Sales did have to ask, if they're re-elected, how they're going to pay it back.
Now you're campaigning for re-election with record debt, and we're not hearing a word about a plan to pay it back.
Well, it's the same plan. By growing your economy and being responsible with your spending, that is the way you reduce the deficits, which is what the budget sets out over the forward estimates and over the medium term. See, but Leigh, as you balance the budget over the years, you're bringing the deficits down as a share of the economy.
Yeah, but the scale of the debt now is the earlier debt pales into comparison.
Even more important, why you actually need a government that knows how to do this. We've done it before. We've cleaned up and dealt with these sorts of situations before.
Yes, he's done it before. Increase the debt, and he's going to do it again. Note he didn't say anything about bringing the debt down, only bringing the annual deficits down, which means Scott Morrison's official plan is actually to keep the debt growing. Rightfully so, Sales wanted to know what we have to show for all this debt.
You've racked up trillions of dollars in debt. What does Australia have to show for it that's a lasting change for the better?
We're building Snowy Hydro. We're building the Western Sydney Airport. We're building the Inland Rail. We've completed the duplication of the Pacific Highway. We've boosted the Bruce.
Oh, great. So let's get this straight. Under 6 years of Labor, we got the NBN and the NDIS, and under 9 years of the Coalition, all we've got is a bunch of road and rail lines that the state should have paid for anyway, and an airport which would probably pay for itself after anyone buys 4 hours worth of parking anyway. And as for boosting the Bruce, I have no idea what that is, and I'm afraid to Google it because I'll probably get some Australian porn video results. Meanwhile, can we get a fact check on this claim?
Before we went into the pandemic, we actually balanced the budget. It took us 6 years to get there.
Oh, balance the budget, did you? At the 2019 Press Club debate, you said you were balancing the budget next year, which of course never happened because the pandemic came along.
We've brought our budget back to surplus. We'll keep it in surplus.
It's not in surplus now.
I said next year. That's what I said.
And we won't know that until
That's what I said. I said we brought the budget back to surplus next year. And
imagine if your kid tried to get away with that kind of routine. Can I get my pocket money for cleaning my room? I already cleaned my room. I swear, I already cleaned my room tomorrow. Moving on from the economy, Sales hassled Morrison over his lack of action on, well, everything.
Let me read you a quote from Anthony Albanese. They always react too little, too late, whether it's the bushfire crisis, whether it's responding to victims of floods, or whether it's ordering enough vaccines. Those three examples are indisputable, aren't they?
Well, I have to disagree on a couple of points there, Leigh. Firstly, $2.9 billion straight in there to support the victims of bushfires.
Okay then, so why are bushfire victims on the New South Wales South Coast still living in tents and temporary accommodation? Just because you say numbers, Scott Morrison, doesn't mean it solves the problem. Leigh, I said $2.9 billion. Didn't you hear that? That solved the problem. And then on the floods, he said this.
On floods, the same has been the case. We had people winching people off roofs within hours of floods hitting.
Sorry, but remind me again who was doing the rescuing in the New South Wales floods?
Authorities are being criticised for their response to the crisis. Communities in New South Wales' northern rivers say they were forced to crowdfund helicopters and put untrained volunteers in charge of emergency rescues.
With the State Emergency Service overwhelmed, it was a citizens' armada of dinghies, jet skis and kayaks who floated to the rescue.
As the clean-up gets underway in parts of northern New South Wales, residents have received some star-studded support.
Yeah, actor Liam Hemsworth and brother Luke have been spotted helping locals alongside tennis legend Pat Rafter.
Today it was the Hemsworths, Luke and Liam, who joined the effort.
Yes, that's right. It didn't appear as though it was the government doing the heavy lifting during the Lismore floods. It was the Hemsworths. What we've got here is a government in favour of smaller government but bigger Hemsworths. And then on the vaccine rollout, Morrison keeps sticking to this weird talking point about the vaccine rollout getting back on track because he appointed General Fruin.
You know, what happens when you have challenges and setbacks in a pandemic? You don't get everything right, and where it isn't going to plan, you change the plan, you get back on top of it. General Fruin was appointed, the vaccine program was turned around, we were able to get access to the vaccines and the deals I was able to do with Poland and the United Kingdom and others, and we ended up having one of the highest vaccination rates in the world.
Yes, because as far as I could tell, having a guy in an army uniform stand up at the press conference didn't help so much as increasing vaccine supply did. When you got on the phone to Poland, Singapore and your pal Boris in the UK. And even then we're all locked down for 3 or 4 months because you kept saying it wasn't a race, remember?
As Brendan Murphy said yesterday, this is not a race. As Brendan said, it's not a race.
But it's not a race. It's not a competition.
Then Sales tried to nail Morrison on pork barrelling and rorts.
And the National Audit Office found that half of the successful projects weren't the ones recommended by Sport Australia, they were ones that went to marginal seats.
Well, and I'm sorry, politicians, elected leaders, ministers ultimately make decisions because we're the ones who are accountable to the public, not public servants, not Sport Australia.
Yes, that's right. He's basically saying that public servants can't be expected to know what's best for a community. The completely well-informed and uncorrupted and unbiased politicians know what's best. Morrison's like, yeah, all these public servants wanted some bummer feasibility study that'll tell you crap like, there's no train station near the train station car park, or it'll kill a bunch of koalas and make some grandmas homeless. Boring. Us politicians know better. Leigh Sales also got Morrison to talk about why he thinks the teal independents are a threat to sitting Liberals.
Why do you think that previously blue ribbon Liberal seats, the kind that usually barely warrant a glance during an election campaign, are vulnerable to independents?
I'd say that our members have done an extraordinary job there, but as time has gone on, many of these places, I suppose, are less vulnerable to the impacts of the economy than, say, many of the places I've been in this campaign.
I think what he's trying to say there is maybe Wentworth and Kooyong don't have coal miners in them. That's why they don't want to vote Liberal anymore. But actually, it's because anyone who's actually paying attention knows that you're not taking climate change seriously and constantly lie about it and talk up unproven technologies, like you did with Leigh Sales.
So our emissions plan, which has already seen emissions fall by around 20%, that's why we believe in investing in carbon capture, use and storage technologies.
Finally, Sales got Morrison to admit he wasn't going to go full Trump at least if he loses on Saturday.
If you lose the election, who will you blame?
Well, I would always accept the result of an election because I trust my fellow Australians.
Yeah, we'll see. I get the feeling if the election result is a very close Labor win, we might not be seeing Anthony Albanese going to the Quad meeting in Tokyo next week. Anyways, if Morrison seemed largely unflappable in his interview with Leigh Sales, over on Nine's A Current Affair with Tracy Grimshaw, well, he got this showstopper.
Prime Minister, you said at your launch on Sunday, I saved the country. You don't hold a hose, you weren't in your tinny plucking people off rooftops, you weren't doing 16-hour days in PPE on COVID wards, you didn't get enough vaccines soon enough, you didn't get enough rats so that we could finally have a holiday interstate for Christmas, and China has set up base in the Solomons. Do you think maybe you slightly over-egged the part about I saved the country?
Well, that's quite a long list you've been able to pull together. But let me say this. We've come through this pandemic better than almost any other advanced country in the world.
God, what a funny response. He's like, yeah, you got the list. Everyone knows I'm a bad leader, but look over there, low unemployment. Stats are real, I promise. Gotta go. Zoink. Anyways, you can probably tell I've almost had enough of this election because I was far more fascinated in the story that followed the Morrison interview on A Current Affair.
Thanks a lot, Tracy.
Prime Minister Scott Morrison. We also have some questions for opposition leader Anthony Albanese, but he's told us he's unavailable. After the break, a much-needed change of pace. We go behind the wheel with Lexi, the driving dog. Welcome back. If you think our pollies are barking mad, wait until you see this.
Does the dog really drive the ute? Of course she does. Really? Yep. There she goes now.
Could this be real? We needed to pull this ute rover. over and see if Lexi would show us up close.
Hey Lex, can you show us how you drive?
Finally some real leadership. You know that dog would never undermine the public servants. Anyways, regardless of who actually wins on Saturday, I just can't wait for it to be...
over.